This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders who are building the future. Hola, I'm Pardavila, and my guest today is Sebastian Bastian. What an awesome name. Sebastian built over 20 companies across gaming, real estate, tech, and logistics, and is the author of the new book, The Lion Beneath the Fade, which breaks down how small decisions create massive change. Today, we're going to get into how real builders think, move, and grow. Sebastian, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Fantastic, and glad to be here and get this conversation going.
Yeah, me too. And so I want to start by something that I picked up on the book that I wasn't really, it was hard for my brain to kind of intersect. It was the idea of you writing about the Bahamas and the hustle culture there. And for people from the States, like we have our version of hustle culture, and it's been well discussed and broken down, and how it's not always the healthiest thing, but we think it's like an inherently American thing. But when I see that a Bahama, as Western culture people, are like, oh, they must be very chill, relax. There's no worry about hustle. Explain to me this Bahamian like hustle culture and what it's like.
Well, like anywhere else in the world, we have our fair share of, the masses that make up the big group of the haves and the have-nots. We're hardworking culture, a lot of working class families, and like everywhere else in the world, the cost of living has outpaced salaries, and as a result of that, to make ends meet, Bahamians are very, very creative, hardworking, and entrepreneurial. So with that, you have a lot of persons that lean on culinary arts, being that we are a tourism destination. You have persons in the tech field. You have certain persons that fully in the tourism field, whether that's transportation, whether that's straw vendors, the whole gamut. And that's always been our strength. Whenever the cost of living outpace wages, like it's historically been doing year over year over year, it kind of forces people into unconventional, just 9 to 5s to make ends meet. And that's how, the hustle's born everywhere.
That's great. And so I currently live in Charleston, South Carolina, but as you can tell by my vibe, Sebastian, I'm originally from the New York City area, spent my entire life there, been down here for 5 years, and it is a recurring, I don't want to say joke because sometimes it's a little more hostile, this idea of like, oh God, will these Northerners get the hell out of here? It's too crowded now. There's traffic because of you. And you talked about the influx of people coming to the Bahamas, not just tourism, people choose to live there either all year round or for most of the year. What is the vibe there? Give me a vibe check in terms of the amount of folks like me that will transport to a warmer climate, and the locals who are like, oh, come on, really? Tell me about how that's going down there now.
Well, we call you guys snowbirds. You
Okay.
normally come between November, you stay until April. We love you because you bring a lot of US dollars with you. And like I said, tourism is our number one industry. So there's never a shortage of visitors to our shores. We have a few people that use the Bahamas as, expats that use the Bahamas as second homes. One, because it's tax advantageous for them to do so. Also, the weather. I mean, the weather and the proximity to the United States is second to none. We have direct flights in and out of almost every East Coast city, Dallas, and some West Coast cities. So, it's just the dollar is 1 to 1. The weather's great. The beaches are amazing. There's nothing not to love. So, we welcome being that tourism is our number one industry. We've came up just kind of really loving and enjoying the visitors, and being very hospitable to them.
That's very nice. Well, that's not, we don't get the Southern hospitality here in Charleston. So I'm glad to hear that you get that in the Bahamas. All right. So, you mentioned the sort of the hustle culture in the Bahamas. And for you, you kind of got it genetically from your father, who nicknamed Smiley, and obviously plays a big role, not only in the book that you've written, but also in your life and the journey that you've gone on to. What is it like? Because I never had an entrepreneurial father. My dad was an immigrant from Spain, came here, worked in shipyards and boats and stuff like that. So he was always like a work for the man kind of guy. Like he wants to get his check every 2 weeks, provide for his family, have a home, and all that jazz. The American dream kind of thing. But tell me what it's like to have an entrepreneurial father like Smiley and what that meant to you and the rest of your life.
Well, when you use the word entrepreneurial, right, it sounds bigger than it is. My father, like I said, he had, uh, you know, 9 kids for 5 different women, depending on who you ask. I always get in trouble for saying that because some people say it's 11 kids for 7 different women. Who knows? I know five kids for nine kids for 5 different women. And when I saw him you have that side restaurant, I wasn't seeing entrepreneurial. I was seeing, well, you got a paycheck over here that might be a little bit short given how many kids you got, and you got to do something else to make some ends meet. And that's what that's what came out of my lens, and just being exposed to that, it really was the foundation of the man I became, because at a very young age I was taught just showing up. I had to show up every Saturday, while kids my age were doing what they kids do on a Saturday, go to fairs and birthday parties. I had to go and grill steaks and get covered in barbecue sauce and smoke. And but it taught me discipline. I had to show up every Saturday. It taught me good customer service, because I wanted to get tips, so I had to be nice and serve everyone well. And it taught me how to cook. I still only can cook steak to this day, but anyway. And it also taught me, budgeting. I had to give change. I had to buy supplies. I had to figure out, he'd make me figure out, this is how much we spent today. So how much did we make? And then when I turned 13, I had a cut. I had a cut into our profit. So I had a vested interest in figuring out and making sure that I'm buying the most cost effective ketchup or napkins and forks or whatever it is. So those were just basic stuff that was happening around the grill, but they were the foundation of the fundamentals and how I was able to approach almost every single business that I've gotten into with that same discipline, showing up, uh, you know, understanding how to budget, understanding good customer service, and making sure that I was always solving a problem with whatever idea or service that I was doing.
That's great. Yeah. And you wrote the book and you mentioned the fact that you were 13 and running the Saturday steak business. Um, Let me ask you here. At 13, I couldn't even imagine running any business. But the fact that you are 13 and I'm sure you're around your dad and you're seeing what he's doing. So it's a lot of like by osmosis you're learning. But was it mostly osmosis, or was your dad the kind of dad who would be like, instead of just like doing his thing and then letting you figure it out, did he give you instructions? What was the relationship like in terms of like how you learned from your dad?
Yeah, it was just the instructions was mostly like preparation, how we set up, how setting up, breaking down, and then teaching you how to buy quality meats, teaching you how to buy quality ingredients, teaching you like a profit and loss. And so it was really, really the fundamentals, to be honest with you. But it was such a successful. I don't know if you've ever, say you're from New York, and there's food trucks everywhere, but there's a couple of food truck that just stands out. You
Yeah.
know, it's not a big fancy restaurant with 100 employees and that seats 300 people, but it's busy. It has a line. It's just a food truck, and everybody wants it. And it was kind of like that, very much a grill outside with a covered terrace, and it was a pop up grill. He had a restaurant and bar. It's a bar inside the pool table, but this grill business was a pop up thing that only happened on Saturdays. So imagine an umbrella, covered terrace, 2 grills, and just some picnic benches. Very informal, but it was the popular hotspot that multiple demographics came. So it wasn't for any particular demographic. You had politicians to plumbers. They all came.
Well, because of all those people, whether they're politicians or plumbers, the value. You guys priced the steak sandwich, I believe, at under $7 Bahamian. Um, how do you pull that off without? Look, I'm joking here, but with it being real meat, because
Yeah.
as you know, the idea of trying to turn a profit. I mean, as you probably know, the story of like Subway sandwiches, like their $5 footlong was a loss leader. Like they lost money on the $5 footlong to get people in the stores. And obviously, as a small business, you can't have loss leaders. It's
Yeah.
not a thing. So tell me how you crunch the numbers to make a sandwich that was so delicious and popular, again, beyond all demographics, but still be a quality sandwich?
I think it was, he was the one of the lead accountants at Winn-Dixie at the time, and he had an employee discount. And his employee discount allowed him to buy large volumes of meat, surprisingly. And he was able to leverage that discount, I guess, to create that arbitrage between price and profitability. And I think that's kind of how he was able to pull it off, because it was a really good quality of meat. And I think that's what drew a lot of people. It was price, but it was also the quality, because you can have some really, $7 steak just doesn't sound like it could ever taste good ever.
Right.
Right.
And so what lesson did you learn about pricing and perception, do you think that like other entrepreneurs might miss? Because like you said, like if someone sees on like a little tent that says $7 steaks, you're like, where's that meat from? Like the perception of it. Like, and I think a lot of other entrepreneurs run into this of like, hey, if we lower something too much, it will give off the perception of it not having quality. Tell me about that sort of fine line that entrepreneurs sometimes have to struggle with.
Yeah, and I think that's defined also by the competitive landscape, right? And sometimes, you have to be competitive if there's already an established market where quality is not compromised, and the floor of where the price is, that's already been established. You're just coming in. There's a couple of big players. There's no issues with their product. It's difficult to go in there and then say, try to then say, all right, I'm going to use price as my advantage. I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs go wrong, because when you have the large groups that are already established, they benefit from economies of scale. They have an infrastructure that the more they sell, the more cost effective their expenses are, because at some point you benefit from economies of scale. And a lot of entrepreneurs go in thinking that they can just nosedive the price and then go up against like the larger companies, and it's tricky. It's now, there has been a lot of examples where you have the larger companies that have just really not diversified their supply chain sufficient enough. They're caught in their own ways, and then you have young entrepreneurs that are going into markets like India or South America or China, and sourcing similar quality products, and they're able to not trade off value. I mean, the value, but bring a good price. Sorry, not trade quality, but bring in substantially lower value. And in those particular circumstances, I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to win the price war. But other than that, I think there's the opposite's also true. It's I think there's a saying, if you want it good and fast, it's not going to be cheap. If you want it cheap and good, it's not going to be fast. And how that goes. So that couldn't be more true. So I think, if you have a good product, like, don't undervalue yourself. You have to know your worth. If you are a barber, a hairstylist, an auto detailer, a really good, coder, whatever it is, and you're reliable, the quality of your product is there. You can come within budget. You can come within the timelines. You don't have that is, having all those qualities is also rare. So, and that's what consumers are looking for. That, not all consumers are value chasing. Some consumers just want, to have a reliable product that's gonna be backed by, service excellence, and they don't have the headache, because a good business is a business that solves a problem. Right.
Mm. That's great. Good stuff. And I want to pick your brain on something here, Sebastian, because you come from that, and this is the last food question, I promise, because I want to move on to your other businesses. But like here in the States, food trucks are incredibly popular. But I am of the age of, I remember going to a food truck, and it was pretty affordable. Like you can get a sandwich or two in under $10, right? Fast forward to 2026, if you go to a food truck, you are spending a lot of money. You're almost restaurant prices for like a sandwich. Like there are times here, in Charleston, food trucks are incredibly popular. And so you'll go and get a couple sandwiches for you and your wife, and it'll cost like $30. You're like, I could have just sat down in a restaurant.
Yeah.
So And obviously, I know inflation plays a big part, and you know better than anyone the cost of meats and all the other stuff. But there's got to be a moment that these food trucks are going to pass this Rubicon where like we're not going to be able to make money because we can't charge enough, but it's going to turn off our customers because they come to us for an affordable price. Tell me, how do you predict this playing out in this world of like the popularity of food trucks, but the prices of the food going up?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, quality is going to win. I think when it comes to something like food is an essential. Everyone has to eat, and I think if you have good food and good service, there's sufficient amount of people that doesn't have that price elasticity in terms of cost of food. There's sufficient enough of them for you to always have a strong customer base if it's good. Now, if you are catering to a demographic where, you know, price is an issue, you're going to have some volatility, as you start to stretch the pricing, that's defiant to the environment or the customer base that you're selling to. So it all depends on, who is your customer. And you have to know that. And in the book, we talk about how do you identify what makes a good business, and it is, what problem am I solving, who is my customer, how much are they willing to pay, and what is the current demand for my product or service. And when you, no matter what the business idea is, no, if you apply those four questions and give honest answers based on research, not based on a hunch or a high, if any of those you have a hard time giving having a good answer to, that's typically a first red flag. If you can't identify who your customer is, if you don't know what the demand is, if you don't have no idea if a real strong conviction how much are they going to willing to pay, and you don't know what problem you're solving, it's not it's going to have a very difficult time being successful.
And you use that 4-question framework you write about in the book. You
Yep.
kind of broke it down for us there. And, obviously you've used that to build and found over 20 companies. But in that framework, what do you think most entrepreneurs miss? Like you mentioned how equally they're all pretty good, but you know how people are with diets, like, I'm going to watch eating fats, but I'll still have a pizza once a week kind of thing. Like which one of those steps do you think entrepreneurs think they can go ahead and skip and be like, 3 out of 4, Sebastian, I'm good. I don't need all 4 of these. What do
Mhm.
you think a lot of them sometimes skip over because they don't see the importance of it?
What problem am I solving? They
Mm.
they skip that. They skip that, and you have guys that. Just the other day, a guy was telling me, he lived out in the eastern side of the island, and he wanted to open a car wash. And he's like, yeah, because there's no car washes in the east. And I say, well, if that's the case, um, if there are none in the east, you realize that means there hasn't been any in the east for the last 30, 40 years. But as you drive around the island, the cars aren't dirty, especially the cars coming out of the east. So the only way that's a problem is if every car in the east is always dirty, then you have two things going. Okay, there's no car wash in the east, and the cars are always dirty. But if you have clean cars in the east, they're obviously that problem is being solved somewhere else somehow. And sometimes a lot of entrepreneurs think that proximity to what they perceive as the problem creates a good business. And that couldn't be further from the truth, because while I might live east and there's no car wash in the residential area that I live, there's certainly one next to my mom's house. There's one next to where I work. There's one outside of the gym. There's one, just on the way on this place that I commute. There's one next to the place I like to go on Saturday. So it's very important that you don't always let proximity and simply said, right? You always have to find a gap in the market. A gap in the market makes a good business, but you got to make sure there's a market for the gap.
Yeah. Yeah. And a great point on that too is, if again, not an entrepreneurial mind here, but the idea of like him saying there's nothing in the East. Well, because of consumer trends and routines, right? Like since you said there's been nothing there for 30 years. So everyone has their routine. And so whatever he builds there has to break people's routines. And as you know, as an entrepreneur, Sebastian, changing people's routines is probably the outside of like extracting money from their wallet,
Yeah.
changing their routines is such a game changer. And that's the thing. Like, what is the value proposition? He better build a freaking amazing car wash on the east side of the island, or no one's going to change their routines.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, good
Absolutely.
stuff. All right, so tell me about these other 20 businesses you founded, because my question is, a lot of people may have like imposter syndrome when it comes to jumping into other realms. So like, you were an F&B guy. You worked in food and beverage as a youngster. You ran that Saturday steak business. What skills did you require that you felt were transferable? Like, it's a lot of HR and people in the people world talk about transferable skills. What were some of the transferable skills you took from those Saturday steak days that you could then assimilate into other industries? I mean, the ones you've worked in is gaming, you've worked in energy, you've worked in logistic technology. What from those steak days applies to all those other verticals?
Well, it's well, one, yeah, you have to have the discipline. So I don't when I see an opportunity, you know, I when you get past the romanticizing phase of it, the intrigue that of it, you then have to go right back into that tunnel vision. So the skill sets I had, I showed up. I knew how to I knew quality and good customer service. I knew that how what demand actually looks like, and not having a hunch. And then I also knew how to just pair ideas. I'm a contrarian by nature, so I don't see problems. I obsessed over the solution. And when you live in a small island nation, like I do, and you travel, you can't help to see, like, when you travel in developed countries, we like 3 to 5 years, sometimes 7 years behind what's already established in these developed countries. So I think for me, that consistent exposure, because in the book I talk about, in those same early days, traveling with my mom, and she was shopping for her supplies for her side hustle, making Easter baskets, Valentine baskets, etc., and just tied in along with her. And just I saw where one of the places where she was buying from was also making personalized caps. You literally pick a cap you want, and then they kind of heat pressed letters or characters or things on it. And then I started to sell hats to my friends. I would take orders, and I would send the orders with my mom when she goes away. But it's that exposure, right? So that little, just traveling with her, and seeing that there's things other places that I typically don't see at home. A light bulb went off in my head, is that, for me to fill these voids, fill these gaps, I have to go where the ideas are. All right. And the reason why people sit home and they get frustrated, and it's like, oh, I can't, I'm trying to come up with a good idea, a good business idea. Well, you'll never come up with it sitting at home, because ideas don't walk. They're gonna walk, sit on the couch next to you and say, hey buddy, you should try this, right? Most of the ideas and businesses that I've started came from trade shows. Going to a trade show, went to a trade show in China when I was 23 years old. It's called the Canton Fair, and it's like a kind of everything show. It literally covers everything, and you just you get exposed to so many different industries, from a manufacturing perspective, a distributor perspective, a reseller. I mean, everything's there. It's mind blowing. And I think exposure is really what kept me on the cutting edge. And then so now that's my formula, how I find the idea. And once I find the idea, I now need to take that idea and run it through the fact checker, right? All right, what problem is this going to solve? Who is my customer? How much are they willing to pay? And is there sufficient demand to make this business profitable? Because, and the reason why you have to always ask that, because things that are popular or things that are in demand in other regions doesn't necessarily transfer as something that's in demand in the Bahamas, and vice versa. So you have to always make sure that you run it through the mill.
That's great. You know, a friend of mine, very successful entrepreneur here in the States, and she cut her teeth with her business at trade shows, and she's at the point now where she doesn't have to go to them, but she said they were incredibly exhausting. It's almost like a Lollapalooza of capitalism. What is it about trade shows that you love? Because for many people who aren't familiar, I mean, it's almost like a giant convention where everyone is just like everyone's type A personalities selling you something, pitching you something. What was it about those trade shows that and like you mentioned, they were a big driver in you finding businesses. But outside of the discoverability, what did you love so much about these trade shows?
I mean, you get it's because you get to discover the unknown. Like for example, case in point, like even in my latter, more successful days, I'm 45 years old. I went to China uh, most recently uh, in 2024. Oh, and I went again in 2025, but I hadn't gone to China for like 7 years until I went in 2024. And when I went to go to a trade show. I was like, you know what? I haven't been in 7 years. I want to go to a show. And, I'm just idea agnostic. I'm going to go through all the industries and comb the whole place. And I came back with an automotive company and a solar company. All right. Just from that, I never went to get into the automotive business. It was because I put myself in that environment. And especially when you're dealing with products or a service or whatever like that, you always got to remember there's always like, you know, 50 people doing the exact same thing.
Right.
Some are factories, some are just reseller of the guy next door, some of the competitor of the guy next door. But by the time you talk to 5 people down that aisle, you're a subject expert. So by person 6, you already said, yeah. So do you have the polyester and 90 milligram weight? Yeah, that one. Because you learned that from the guy a couple boots ago.
That's great.
And you're able to compare prices. And then when you live in a country like the Bahamas, where almost everything's imported, there's a lot of arbitrage and price arbitrage that can be found if you compare the right products to the consumer demand locally.
That's great. Good stuff. All right. So for folks not into that trade show game, obviously it works. It's helped you very much, and even recently. So I want to unpeel a layer about the title of the book, which is The Lion Beneath the Fade. And I'm curious, what does becoming a lion truly mean beyond just a financial success? Because you got the financial success. You got it in spades. But beyond that, what does becoming a lion truly mean for a human?
Well, if life has taught any of us anything, right? Their happiness is a compilation of a bunch of different emotions or just situations within one's life. Predominantly, finance is always that elephant in the room for everybody. For many people, just because of what we talked about when we first started about the cost of living outpacing wages. But then there's the health component. There's that supports, a lion. You can't be a weak, frail lion roaming around the world. There is the support. Even the king of the jungle needs, spiritual support, emotional support, just support from friends and peers. And then you have kind of the you're the family part of it as well, which creates the why. Why are you doing all of this? And you realize right away you can being a lion outside of just finances is having a holistic, complete life that really addresses or encompasses all those different things that come together to make up true happiness and life's purpose.
That's good stuff. You can read all about it in The Lion Beneath the Fade. He is Sebastian Bastian. Sebastian, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Sebastian or other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.